call the meeting to order, but I'd also like to note that there is not a quorum. There's a quorum? Oh, because I'm a commissioner. All right, there are three of us. We're going to start this meeting of the Mayor Commission work session for Monday, March 11th, 10:01 a.m. And we're going to have a railroad crossing update, and the presentation will be by Kevin Volbert, Director of Engineering Services, and Yuen Dang, Principal.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having us this morning. So this morning we're going to talk a little bit of rail safety in the city of West Palm Beach and go through the programming and the education that we've been working on since 2022. And I'm not sure if everybody remembers, but we kicked off this program in December of 2022 with an initiative and a promise with our partners, with the FRA, FDOT, Palm Beach County, FEC, and essentially Tri-Rail and Brightline were our partner as we kick off this initiative. And with this initiative, we set forth our path for everything that we accomplished this year with the intention of keeping it rail safe in our city of West Palm. So I'm going to go through everything that we've done up to this date. Last year, we initiated this C-Track Think Train, and with Public Works, with our partner with Public Works, we went out and stenciled every single crossing in the city of West Palm Beach as an educational piece of when you see track, you think of railroad and the trains that's there. And this is the presence of the Brightline moving to Orlando, and this is working in collaboration of our quiet zone, the last quiet zone that we established in the city. Kevin from our engineering services department also have been working on what we call blank out signs. Here's an example right there. He's been working on the design and permitting it with our track signals. So essentially at Clematis, when a train is entering or exiting the station, that you'll see that there's a blank out sign notifying, signalizing the drivers not to turn. The other thing that we've also done is we visited and we audit every single crossing in the city of West Palm Beach, and we turn all that signage and the non-compliance to our Public Works Department, and I'm happy to report that our Public Works Department has updated every single signage within our rail safety and within our within the railroads itself. We also held public workshops that I'm going to go into a little bit of details of our findings with our public workshop. And, we work collaboratively with the HCD, and using the BERT process has been really, really helpful of getting our initiatives out there. Kevin, in a little bit, is going to give you a more technical, presentation on Fern Street and our status of Fern Street itself. So the good news is, I want to give you an update. The quiet zone on the north end has been established and it is in place. Just a reminder, we have 3 quiet zones in the city of West Palm Beach, one on the SFRTA, which we identify with as Tri-Rail. The other one is south of the, along the FEC, the Brightline corridor, South 15th Street all the way down to Gregory. And this last one that we're happy to report is north of our city. And again, I want to remind you that train horn safety rules still apply. So when the train engineer, when he or she sees something that's unsafe, whether if it's along the corridor, they will sound the horn. So I just want to remind everybody, just because we have a quiet zone, it doesn't mean that they don't stop notifying the residents and the activities around that area. The other thing that we've done is we went out to the north end of the city and we host a public workshop. And within this public workshop, we asked a few things. We said, what do you think we can do better? Where are some specific area that you think that we can improve? And a lot of the comments and feedback is collected here on this board right here, which help us understand where can we, our maintenance program should be focused on next. The other thing that we asked is, what are some programs that will help us understand what are the needs of the community? And as you can see in front of you, there's 2 printout. One of the things that the residents asked is that the information that's out there for rail safety is too complex for them to understand. And if you see a lot of information out there, we target this education on kids. And kids alone. And so, again, this is what our residents are asking. This has not been rolled out yet. We want you to be the first one to see this information in English and Spanish. And so we think of this program as Stop, Look, and Listen to educate our kids around railroad and rail activities itself. And of course, we gather additional feedback that's really helpful, that helps us with whether, programming safety projects like lighting projects or, additional maintenance programs that we should be considering for this upcoming year. We take all that information, and so what we've done successfully this last year, is we were awarded with a grant that's called the RCE grant. It's short for Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant, and this is a planning study in in this upcoming year. And the planning study again will double down and look at two things. It's going to look at short-term and long-term improvements in the city, and we identified that already. And it's also looking at opportunities for pedestrian bridges. We need grade separations in areas that there isn't any. So if you think about the north end of the city, the two crossing that we have is on 36th Street and 45th Street. That's a long way for kids to cross. And there's two elementary schools on each side, so they don't always go to the east side or the right side or the west side. Essentially, they do cross the track somehow. So again, it's a feasibility planning study that's going to kick off this summer. Kevin and his team is already starting working on the agreement with FHWA to draw down the money, and we're going to kick off the program this summer. As we're developing this, you can expect that we will be targeting additional funding for design construction as we discover where are our best opportunities for any rail safety in the city. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn over to Kevin for an update on Fern Street and the first update of Fern Street crossing
before we
the
move
city.
this on?
Yeah, sorry.
Madam President, if I could just, one thing I wanted to add to the presentation regarding the crossings in general within the city, and I think a lot of our commissioners and maybe even other staff don't realize that we have to maintain the crossings. They're not maintained by FSRTA, they're not maintained by FEC. We have agreements with them to maintain the crossings. Those are annual maintenance fees that we have to pay, and in some cases we have to upgrade the crossings. Thankfully, Administrator Johnson brought forth to you all, and you all approved last year some one-time funding for some upgrades, much-needed upgrades in the north end for some crossings, and those will be underway here shortly. But that was one-time funding. Generally, we had to use this gas tax, right, for those crossing upgrades, which takes away then from paving money. So it is not an inexpensive endeavor to do these upgrades and these maintenance fees that we have to pay every year. So it's a significant cost, and I just wanted you to be aware of that because we do get a lot of feedback about the crossings and things that folks would like to see, but it's a challenge budget-wise.
I have a question. Thank you. Before you proceed, Mr. Volbert, are there questions of Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that we're, well, first of all, I appreciate all of the communication that we're doing for railroad safety, so thank you for all of this. And you mentioned replacing some of the signage. What about the rubber delineators that are there that keep people from going around the crossings?
Those get maintained also by Public Works. Those have been put there by Public Works, and they get maintained by Public Works. All the signage, the delineators, all the striping, everything that's on both sides of the railroad tracks that the city has installed and maintains.
Okay, and I don't know if I have seen some that are constantly run over. They're very easy to run over. Are we finding that those are still the best solution for that?
Well, there's alternative solutions that we would need to look at how we would be able to incorporate that. If we put a curb there or something else, sometimes that inhibits other movements around that area. You know, there may be a driveway or something like that. So it's kind of a mixed bag about what's the optimal solution to that. The delineators are definitely a solution to it, but yes, they do need to be kept up and maintained.
Yeah.
So
If I can add to that, we did look with Public Works at a different system than just a tubular delineator, where it's a system of delineators that's railroad approved. And I know that Public Works has been, looking to procure some of that so we can install it in the ground. That's only a short-term measure. I think the long-term measure that you're gonna see as a result of the study is that we need concrete median so that we don't have that activities. So for those who are not fully understand of at every crossing, what we have sometimes is we call quad gates, where all 4 gates come down. Some of the crossings that we have south of the city only have 2 gates. They're called exit gates. And what that does is, like, for the tubular delineators or any system or even curbing that we were to install, is to prevent vehicles from driving around the gate arms so that they can provide the optimal safety.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned when 45th and 36th is crossings for children. And another one I just wanted to point out was that 15th Street crossing. And I know I've contacted the school about it. I don't know how much we're working and communicating with the school, but a lot of the children from Coleman Park go to Pleasant City Elementary and vice versa. And that crossing right there for the neighborhood has always been a very big concern. And I know, Kevin, you and I've talked about this before. I brought it up to the school board, but I would love it if we would try to figure out a way to communicate better with them, because they're still saying that, maybe it's a crossing guard or something like that. I know updating that crossing is a heavy endeavor, and it seems to be on us, but until then, given the high-speed rails, maybe it is prudent upon us to figure out another way so the parents aren't as concerned about their children crossing at that 15th Street crossing as much as they are right now.
Kevin, if you don't mind. Yes, we received that same similar feedback, not just on the FEC, but at 15th Street across over at SFRTA. We've reached out to SFRTA already to initiate the maintenance program, especially put focus more and reprioritize at 15th Street by closer to Australian Avenue. But we will definitely look into further details, see if there's any short-term improvements that we can make there.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the Fern Street project that we're undertaking right now. Basically, it's involving a new at-grade crossing at Fern Street on the SFRTA tracks between Tamara and Australian. Also involved with that is prerequisites for providing closures of crossings, 2 crossings for 1 opening. We have been working with FDOT on this very diligently over the past 2 years, and we have agreed that we're going to be closing 2.5 crossings, which helped us to get them to be more acceptable to us putting in the Fern Street crossing itself. The crossings that are going to be closed is one at 25th Court, one at Division Avenue, and then 1/2 of the crossing down at Old Okeechobee and Parker Avenue, basically the southbound slip ramp that goes across the railroad tracks there. We're going to be closing that. The Fern Street alignment itself is shown here on the left of this slide. Basically, it's going to involve a reconfiguration of Fern Street such that it's going to be moving further to the south, such that it will line up with the road that is on the west side of the railroad tracks there. And that's going to actually involve acquisition of 2 parcels of land that are currently there that CRA is currently actively pursuing, working with the property owners to be able to acquire that land so that we can move forward with this project. The track work and the railroad signal work will all be done by SFRTA, and their consultants and their engineering staff will be the ones designing that. The city will be responsible for designing all of the roadway work. So everything that comes up to the railroad tracks for the Fern Street crossing, as well as what needs to happen at the locations where the closures are going to take place, is going to be the city's responsibility. 25th Court and Division Avenue are not that complicated. The Old Okeechobee crossing that we're closing, it's going to involve it's going to actually involve sort of an intersection reconfiguration there at Old Okeechobee and Parker Avenue that we're gonna work on doing that. Probably signalize that intersection, make it more pedestrian friendly, all kinds of really great improvements that will actually enhance Parker Avenue. in that section south between Okeechobee and Belvedere. So the stipulation of parties and the project funding agreement, the commission just approved those things on March 4th. That's the first step. The stipulation of parties is essentially the permit from FDOT to allow us to move forward with the project. That particular one gave us the permission to do the 2.5 closures. Now, we've got that from us signed. We're sending that to FDOT and SFRTA for them to execute the agreement. Once they get that back, they will begin to procure whatever consultant they want to use to do their track work design. We're anticipating that that's going to be started this summer, and the roadway design that the city needs to undertake for that, we're anticipating that we're going to start that up this fall. The construction time frame is to be determined at this point because it depends on what the design time frame is and what's going to be involved in that. Overall, the agreement stipulates that this all has to be completed within 5 years. We're hoping to be able to obviously do it before that. We're understanding that the estimated cost of this program, this whole entire project, the opening and the closures, is going to be in a $20 to $30 million range. It's a very expensive project. However, the design work that we're undertaking to begin with, we do have the funding for that. We also have funding for property acquisition that's currently in the budget, and that's going to be taken care of. The funding itself for the $20 to $30 million, there's a number of options that we have and opportunities that we have for that. The project is on the long-range transportation plan. It was put on that at the TPA, and that will enable us to pursue federal grant money towards the project. CRA is going to be contributing money towards the project, and we are currently working with our federal lobbyist to try to get some appropriations from the federal government towards the Fern Street crossing itself in next fiscal year. So we're very diligently going after everything that we can to be able to help to fund this project because we realize it's very important. It's going to make a big difference to the traffic burden that Okeechobee and Banyan currently have, particularly with all of the growth that's continuing to go on downtown, such that it's really, really necessary to do, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure it happens. So that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. I am a huge advocate for this project, and I think that opening up an additional artery to our downtown and helping people to get in and out of the city is essential, and so I'm very excited to see a timeline on this. And I know that at the last commission meeting when we approved the permit relationship that the mayor mentioned, yes, but we would need to still find the money. So I'm really grateful that you talked a little bit more about how we were finding the funds. The federal grants that you're talking about, do we have any idea of how much they'll be and what the delta will be that we'll be looking to pick up?
Well, we're currently, the appropriations we're going after is the $5 million range. There's other grants available. There's one called a CRISI grant, and forgive me, I can't explain to you what that acronym means, but it is through the Federal Railroad Administration that we are also going to be pursuing to help us pay for this. There's also other grants available for the actual crossing closures that are more readily available that we're going to pursue after that. We have the RCE grant for the pedestrian bridges. We're going to pursue that type of a grant to help us fund the closures themselves because it's amenable to that type of a category. So we're going to work on that as well. So we are going to be running very fast, very hard over the next 3 to 4 years to get this project moving with whatever it takes to happen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's our commitment.
Let me just add another thing too, is that we've got a lot of private sector interest in this crossing, and we've had some discussions with some members of the private sector who are willing to hopefully contribute. That's the word that I've been receiving. And also the $5 million is per project that we would be going after with the grants. So we have 2.5 crossings plus the Fern Street crossing, so a total of 3.5 projects. So we've been trying to get the $5 million for each.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fox.
Thank you both so much. This is fantastic. I love these educational pieces. I actually think maybe the next round should have 30-year-old pictures because seriously, like when I walk around all the time and I can't imagine that people are this dumb, but they continue to think that they can beat the train. And I feel like kids are actually smarter and they're probably being educated in a way that adults need to be reminded that now we have Brightline coming 2 different ways, other trains. But thank you for all you're doing here. But my question is about Fern Street. I continue to see the issue on Fern Street and Quadrille. I think it's probably the same on Clematis and Quadrille. But if you're in a car going east or west, the light turns green, you're moving along going east, and then people behind you think they're in the flow of traffic, and so they stop on the tracks, and maybe there's a pedestrian that the car in front is waiting for to turn, or whatever the case may be. But I think it's not intentional that people are stopping on the tracks, but they think the light is green and that they're moving along. And so I don't know if there's anything to do about either more education at that crossing or just some kind of enforcing that to people that they are basically, because we have 2 sets of tracks there, it's so wide. There's just there's a lot of room for cars to be parked there. And so I see it all the time. We obviously had a horrific incident there at that stop, but people still continue to do it. And if you were going west, if you're driving west and you stop at the stop sign right in front of Publix, it's even worse because the traffic at 5 o'clock gets so backed up that it can be, all the way across Quadrille. So I think just looking forward to, obviously, when we have the Fern Street crossing, we're going to have actually more cars using Fern Street as a crossing. And so that, issue is going to continue to get worse. So I don't know, what we can do about it, whether it's just more education or signage or something, but just to remind people that we have trains that are coming and going and that stopping on the tracks is not a good idea. But thank you for everything else.
I totally recognize that concern, and with the Fern Street crossing coming into place, definitely there'll be a lot more activity in the east-west directions on Fern Street. We are currently working with Palm Beach County, who are responsible for all the traffic signals in the city. They have a program where they actually want to put another traffic signal on Fern Street in the eastbound direction that is going to be west of the railroad tracks, such that people would stop before the railroad tracks rather than having to drive across the railroad tracks before the traffic signal is there. The potential of incorporating some sort of other traffic controls, blank out signs or something, depending on what the queuing and volume links and all those are during certain periods of time, we could certainly pursue that. We will definitely bring that up with Palm Beach County so that we can look at that and be a lot more proactive about how we would be able to improve that situation that is going to occur probably in the future when this Fern Street crossing actually goes into place. So thank you for bringing that up, and we will definitely keep that in mind and do what we need to do to try to improve that situation as best as possible.
And there is some improvements that are being done on the Clematis side, coming out of the Brightline station. That was the sign at the blank out sign.
There's one of the blank out signs for the people that are coming from the west side of the tracks, such that where they're coming along the road that runs right in front of the Brightline station, when the train signals come down, they need to have that blank out sign so they don't turn right, because you're not facing the tracks like this where you see those blank out signs, and we're adding one of those. We're having that engineered right now, and we expect to have that put in this summer. So that is another thing that's happening. Clematis is a little bit different issue, and we're not really thinking about putting a signal on the west side of the tracks there, but Fern Street definitely there's room for improvement there, and the county is already working on putting together plans for that traffic signal that's going to be on the west side of the railroad tracks.
Kevin, if you don't mind, if I can add, I know we talked a lot about signage throughout this presentation. and especially with signalizations and blank out signs, those are regulatory signs that our police enforcement can enforce. So it's very important that we have to have those in place so that we can have the education and the enforcement to back it up. So as you know, Commissioner Fox, that there's the 3 E's to Vision Zero. It's engineering, like that's the first thing that we need, and then it's education and enforcement or equity. So that is the importance why we keep on referencing signage.
And engineering can only do so much. So education is very, very important as well as enforcement.
Thank you. Commissioner Paduzzi?
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. I think education is the key here. Obviously, the other E's are important as well. We had a lengthy discussion at the TPA probably a year or two ago about rail safety. And some good ideas came up, but also some good information was disseminated to the TPA members. And I was talking about the fact that we need to have really simple education. I mean, this is great, but is someone going to take the time to read this? As Commissioner Fox pointed out, we're not having children hit on these tracks. I mean, it's adults that are completely disregarding or getting themselves caught in the middle, and that's the problem. We have this unique situation where we have such a large span with tracks, you know, a double set of tracks with trains going each direction. And what I said, the education, I mean, I thought the education needed to be very simple: get off the tracks. It doesn't matter how you get off the tracks, you just have to get off the tracks if a train's coming. If that means running up on a curve, do it. If that means knocking a gate down that's, you know, on the other side, do it. You know, you have to get off the tracks. And something that I don't know if it was county engineering or someone told us that those gates are actually meant to drop. So if you tap them, they're going to fall. You're not damaging anything. It's a $1 pin, they told us. So I think that we have to just, you know, continue with education such as this, but maybe even simpler than this, and tell people that you just have to get off the tracks. And there's usually a way to get off the tracks, but people are afraid because they don't want to damage property. They don't want to run up on a curb or mess up the grass, you know, but it's going to be much worse if the train hits you. That's right. So, I mean, that was something that, as I said, we spent a long time discussing with the TPA, and I think we need to continue that conversation.
Yeah, that's a campaign that we can do. I think, you know, the C-Tracks, I think train is a good one, but something to that effect, to just get off the tracks, and we can also do it in Spanish. We've talked a little bit last week about some Spanish language outreach, particularly in the south end, or the north end as well, because there are a lot of folks that are pedestrians that are crossing those tracks. One thing to point out, though, with the pedestrian fatalities that you've seen in South Florida, unfortunately, a lot of them have been people who are committing suicide or on some kind of substance. That's the report that I saw.
So this campaign is geared toward children that may be crossing, correct?
Yes, it's so the intention when we were coordinating with the residents and with RISE is that create an educational campaign for kids so that they can work with their families, because elementary school kids, and I have a child in elementary school that still love me for a little bit longer. So I think that's a really good opportunity for kids in elementary school to work with their parents on the importance of track safety. But I acknowledge that the education for illicit behavior is it's going to be dependent on more adult education. There's another grant that we actually applied last year, and we have not received words if we received it or not. So that's why we didn't want to report on it. But we applied for a grant called a SMART grant. And, when we thought about the program, it is a year-long for $1.5 million of smart signal technology, or just smart camera technology, because there's a lot of information that we don't have. Usually incidents are after the fact, an incident that has crashes or anything that's been reported by our police officers. But this program that we designed is essentially to use AI technology at the crossing and to see if there's any illicit behavior. And it's also near misses or even, a lot of trespassing activities that we don't usually get. So it's, one, to get that data and that data collection. Two is to work with the police enforcement, because the team is Chief Adderley and his team to be out there for target enforcement to supplement some of our, our resources that's out there. And the last piece to that grant is to build a cohort, a foundation throughout the South Florida area, because we can't do this alone as a city, but to build that relationship with SFRTA and the FEC and then Brightline as best practices so that we can continue to educate and enforce.
I can only imagine that during a situation where someone's caught between the tracks and that it's a deer in the headlight situation and common sense flees, and the simplest thing, to Commissioner Peduzzi's point, would be get off the tracks. So how likely is it that we would be able to do something in its simplest form, like in the inside of the tracks have a message that says get off the tracks? So if your car is there and the rail and the bar comes down, you see that sign on the back of it that says get off the tracks. Would that be a simple solution or not one that's feasible?
I think that's something we can coordinate with the FRA and especially the FEC. It's not standard MUTCD signage, but and again, there's additional signage that we can do. We do have a sign shop here that we can post at and every crossings.
And perhaps it should be, to Commissioner Peduzzi's point. We'll go to Lambert, Ward, and then Peduzzi. Commissioner Lambert.
I don't know, there's so much now. Okay, I just wanted to comment and reiterate what Commissioner Fox said. I was actually headed east on Fern Street, and the light turned green, and I was west of the tracks, and so I thought, oh, okay, I can go over the tracks now and cross safely, and we started to go, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but somebody stopped, and I got stuck on the tracks, and there wasn't a train coming, but it was very alarming, and so thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Fox and Kevin, for prioritizing that in the new crossing, because I think that is something that even people who are extremely aware can still get stuck there. I love this, so thank you so much for this. I was just telling someone a story about PSAs, and I just think that, as a country, as a whole, we've kind of lost this, community education. And I remember freaking out on my mom when I was probably your son's age and saying, Mom, don't drink and drive. And she was drinking a Diet Coke, but I was so freaked out. But she made sure, to communicate with me and to talk to me about what that meant. And I just think that, starting with our kids, because, they grow up faster than we'd like them to, is a great way. And so I don't know if you mentioned, how are we getting this message out, and what is our plan for this?
Our intention is to roll out to the community. And we have not finalized our plans, but RISE has a Girl Scout troops that meet at their building, and we were going to turn those Girl Scout troops in as a pilot, as our ambassador, so our railway ambassador program. And so we definitely would start with the neighborhood first and try to solicit kids to help us to get the programs out.
Yeah, we can have discussion. Like I said, this is new. We could have discussions with the school board as well and try to get to our elementary schools. I think that would be a fairly easy way that then gets to the parents as well, and translate this into Spanish. Maybe we should also do one for adults. Just change the kids for adults.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward.
I know we've had multiple conversations about rail safety, and I can't remember who I had this conversation with, and I know there's other technologies and things like that, but I know that there was one conversation about lights when it came to if there's a train coming, and because I've been in that position, and I see a lot of people doing it just because they're being antsy and they want to move forward, but also just accidentally getting stuck. And I know all the trains are timed, especially with Brightline, but the other railroad track as well. Everything is timed. And instead of having get off the track, a light system that's green, yellow, red, or red, hey, there's a train coming, and when you're seeing that red sign, you need to get off of these tracks. And maybe, I don't know if it was Kim that was talking about that, but I thought that there was something, some other program that was
Yeah,
looking at that.
I'm sorry. Yes, there is. I'm sorry, Kevin. There is. It's called pre-preemption. FDOT is exploring it. It's basically if you're in a gridded network in downtown West Palm Beach, if as the train is approaching, it flush out all the traffic signal and the because part of the congestion that we have is just too much activities in downtown. So it flush out all the link and the signals within that network so that you can have throughput. And I know FDOT is currently exploring it. It's been on many workshops that I've participated that it's not only, it's for rail safety. It's, and typically when a train comes, which is a mile before they come to a complete stop, so it's 3 or 4 crossing before it hits downtown, for example, it will flush out the other network of turn greens.
I think it's important to point out, we can't do a lot of this stuff unilaterally. If it's off the tracks, yes, we can add signs, but within the crossing itself, we have to have approval from these external agencies who are actually the owners of the tracks, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Paduzzi?
Thank you. I think Commissioner Lambert brought up a very good point with these flyers, because I was looking at these, that the target audience is not right, but I've been a huge proponent of those PSA messages that when I was growing up, the Woodsy the Owl, the Smokey the Bear, and she was right, that kids really do talk to their parents about these things, and sometimes kids can bring that message to their parents directly, probably better than we can. And it's probably easier for us to actually reach the message to those children, probably easier than giving it directly to their parents. So that's something I didn't consider. But the other thing was that during that TPA meeting that we had, we found out that the most dangerous rail corridor in the nation is right here in South Florida. It's our rail corridor. The most dangerous, the most deadly, the highest incidence of fatalities right here in South Florida. And they said it's just because we don't have rural, primarily rural stretches of rail. We have them running right through the cities as opposed to way outside of the cities. And because of that, we have some unique problems, especially the city of West Palm Beach with our downtown and how densely populated it is. And these corridors and these intersections with the double tracks and the like, it's just a recipe for disaster. But I think that the time is right for us to be having these discussions because of the fact that, this is it. This is the epicenter of where everything's happening in the United States on rail corridors. It's the most deadly section in the nation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. That's absolutely true. It is the deadliest corridor. One positive, though, is if you look at the city of West Palm Beach in terms of the record, and then one fatality is one too many, but we've done pretty well considering the amount of volume and traffic here, and we're also the only city I know of in the county that's really pursuing rail safety in the way that we are in terms of going after grants, education campaign, and we're on an island.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes?
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Next up, we have Parks and Recreation proposed ordinance changes with presentations by Leah Rockwell, Melissa Anderson, and Sergeant Hessier. Would you like to provide any background for this, Administrator Johnson?
Good morning. I'm going to let Ms. Rockwell do the lead in, but we do have a change in the staffing participation from the police department. Sergeant Heiser couldn't be here. So do we have Sergeant Davis here?
So, excuse me, I'm Leah Rockwell, Director of Parks and Recreation. Sergeant Davis is on his way. He was in court this morning. He's hoping to get here in time.
Thank you.
Okay, so good morning and welcome. We are here to present some proposed revisions to our city ordinance, Chapter 58, for Parks and Recreation. I'm going to kick it off by saying the goal of this session today is to explain the restatement of Chapter 58 and to discuss proposed additions to the chapter and to discuss some minor changes to 78 as well. So with that, I am going to let Melissa talk a little bit about the next slide.
Good morning. this on? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Good morning, Melissa Anderson with the City Attorney's Office. I helped Leah redraft this parks ordinance. And the reason that we're calling it a restatement is there was nothing in the old parks ordinance, which you're going to see crossed out starting on page 7 of the ordinance, that was left behind unless it was redundant or just didn't belong in Chapter 58. So everything that was in the old parks ordinance was restated in section 581A of the new ordinance. And you're going to see I'm going to call it a laundry list, but it's a comprehensive laundry list on pages 2 and 3 of your ordinance of all the prohibited or regulated activity in parks, which, after having discussed it with parks and looking at it with a critical eye, we thought should be consolidated to make it more user-friendly for people who are coming into parks, and also our code enforcement and our police officers to enforce. And so that's what we've done in the first couple pages of the ordinance, which is why we're calling it a restatement. So there was nothing left, there was nothing that was deleted unless it was redundant or wasn't necessary, and everything that was previously in the ordinance has been restated in the first 2 pages of the ordinance.
So then we're just going to go into the definition of prohibitive activities.
So prohibited activities, as you can see, starts on page 2 of your ordinance, and it's essentially just a laundry list of everything that was contained in the old ordinance that's been transferred to subsection 8 to make it comprehensive, so that if you know you're going into a park and you have a question, can I build a fire in a park? Well, I'm gonna find it in this section. I'm gonna look here and see what I can and cannot do, and then I'm gonna be able to have my questions answered. And so essentially, that's what you're seeing in this first section.
So I'm going to then go into prohibited activities that we have proposed in this item to be added. Trends and issues have changed. What's going on in our parks is very different than what was going on 10, 15, 20 years ago. There were some games and activities that were listed in there that were like the turn of not this century, but the century before. So we really had to clean up some of the language. So here we go to some things that we needed to add to help our police department, our code enforcement officers, as well as our parks and recreation staff. And we really went through this in depth with our police department. So this one is near and dear to many of you. Beaching of dinghies or other vessels in an area not designated for vessels. Using city water and city electric when not authorized to do so. Tampering with or destroying a fire department connection or fire control equipment such as extinguishers. Hanging or otherwise placing laundry or any other items from trees, signs, or any other public property. You'd be surprised. And then anchoring or mooring in an underwater lease area. Drones in parks and recreation areas. Leaving a vessel, dinghy, kayak, paddleboard, or other form of water transportation unattended in a park. Chaining or locking of personal property to trees, seawall, poles, signs, fences, or other structures prohibited except in designated areas. So those are section like A. Do you have any questions about any of those at this point in time?
Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time. You know, I've been a big proponent of this and bugging you guys, but I really appreciate this coming forward. And Melissa, thank you for talking with me, and Kimberly for being so responsive in my commentary. So I really wish police were here, and I guess maybe we could circle back afterwards, but it really is just enforcement.
Right.
With the dinghies, the residents at 45th Street, the residents near Osborne Park. I know that there's other waterfront parks and other areas as well. this has been such an issue for them. And so what does it mean when it comes to that enforcement aspect? Which department's going to be enforcing? How are we removing those vessels when this is inevitably going to happen? What's our game plan?
So what I can speak to that is as follows. If it is above the high mean water mark in the park, say at Gettler Park, then, and it's unattended, then our staff can move the dinghy, so to speak, into a storage facility that we have. The only issue with that is dinghies often don't have markings that you can prove that it belongs to you. So now that we've removed their dinghy, they come to us and they say, hey, you have my dinghy. Well, how do you prove to us that it's yours? So that's where we have to really figure out with the police department, how are we going to manage who owns that piece of property that was left in the park that has no demarcation on it. And as far as what we do on our docks is now we're red tagging the boats that are staying there that shouldn't be staying there. And then after a certain period of time, the police department will start to fine. So we will be doing the same thing with any boats that are inappropriate, either moored on submerged land leases that the city has or beaching of boats.
Yes.
Sorry, so the period of time, what period of time is that and when do we remove them?
So we're going to try and remove them at least at a minimum weekly, if they are above that high water mean mark. If they are not, then it's a state issue and we're unable to touch the vessels at that point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. I had a question about the drones.
Yes.
I'm just thinking about, let's say in Dreher Park, sometimes there's a 5K, and sometimes with the 5K, they want to have a drone come in to take a picture of the walkers and runners. Is that still going to be allowed?
So you'll see if we go back to, to this, it says permitted. So if there's an event going on in a park and they get a permit and they let us know that they're having a drone, then our police department will let them know what they can and cannot do. So drones are really not supposed to fly over people. So they have to be at a certain height. So we will work with those organizations as far as permitting to have those drones in those areas.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Paduzzi.
Thank you. I have had numerous conversations with a concern that Sergeant Heiser had regarding hunting in public areas, especially iguanas. And he said to me that apparently there's no law on the books that necessarily prohibits hunting of iguanas and other invasive species, which in some cases are actually encouraged by, I think, by the state. And he said he had received multiple phone calls from people over the last couple of years inquiring as to whether they can do iguana hunting in our parks, especially along waterways. And the problem is he was kind of trying to discourage them, but couldn't point to a specific ordinance, rule, or law that would prohibit it specifically. Now, I notice in this draft ordinance, it says possession and or discharging projectile weapons unless such weapons are allowed under Florida law. Does this ordinance go far enough to prohibit that type of conduct when it might otherwise be allowed by Florida law? We don't want people hunting in our parks. So maybe does it have to go further?
So if you look at number 4 on that list, on page 2 of the draft ordinance, number 4. Harming, hunting, molesting, feeding, removing animals or other. So we do address that we prohibit hunting of animals in our parks.
Okay. Hopefully that goes far enough to actually prohibit it.
Yeah. And with iguanas, there are, we have looked at actually when they have been so out of control, there are trappers that we can hire. However, we did that year that I had all of these trappers meet me out there to discuss what it would cost to have them come and do this in a way that was acceptable. by the time I was getting ready to do the contract, we had a group of people come and eliminate many of the iguanas from Deer Park in particular. So I wasn't able to do it the way that we wanted to do it.
Thank you, and just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
I don't think Sergeant Heiser or others necessarily have a problem specifically with the removal of the iguanas.
Right.
The problem is the police department receiving 911 phone calls from people that are carrying rifles in our parks and in our public areas. And he was just trying, I think, to avoid phone calls like that that called for a priority police department
Right.
response, when really they're just using pellet guns, but they look like
They look like
rifles.
this. Yes, you're right, absolutely. So we're going to move on in Chapter 58, where we talk about Section C. So our ordinance currently just talks about bicycles, but we know that bicycles are now electric bicycles. They're scooters, they're golf carts, they're motorcycles, and there's ATVs. So we felt in order to enforce that bicycle section, we needed to add these other elements to that code because we're having an issue just throughout the park system with these types of vehicles as well. Or modes of transportation, as my transportation people would tell me. And then Section 5881E provides that adults shall not be allowed in playgrounds unless such adult is accompanying a minor. Now, this is a code that the county currently has. There's several counties in Florida and municipalities that have added this to their ordinances to help with individuals hanging out in playgrounds without children, which makes some of our parents and youth uncomfortable. So then we're going to move on to some definitions here, and I'm going to let Melissa take this.
So there actually aren't a whole lot of changes to chapters 58 and 78, but the changes that we did make are important, really important, and one of the major changes it was in section 5881 and also in chapter 78 to define public property and public places, because what was happening is there were violations that were occurring in public places that were not city parks. And the city was having a hard time enforcing those infractions. And so what we did is we added a definition which comes from our own planning code, 94-611, section 94-611, of what public property and public place means, and they encompass city parks, so that now all of the regulations in Chapter 58 can be enforced not just in city parks, but in public places. And we think that's an important change that the commission, should be aware of. That allows, again, to say it again, allows all the regulations in Chapter 58 to be enforced not just in city parks, but in public places.
Commissioner Paduzzi?
Just a quick question. I assume Grassy Waters would be considered a public place?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lambert?
Since we're updating turn of the century terms, are we still having telephone booths?
So I said to Melissa, they're going to bring up
somebody's going to bring it up.
They're going to bring it up, and I'm going to stand up here looking silly. Go ahead.
Do you want me to address it? So I think because my thinking when I wrote this was because this is coming from another section of the code, I did not want to change it. I think, though, for the future, it's certainly something to look at. Certainly, if the planning department is updating definitions in that part of the code, probably it should be updated.
I don't know where Superman would change otherwise.
Right.
So just know that there are some defunct phone booths throughout the city. Some do have phones in them, maybe not without the ear, the speaking. What do we call that?
Receiver?
receiver, thank you. It's been so long, and some don't have anything in them. So they are still there, and we do still have people that kind of keep their stuff in them. And so this is a way for us to make sure that we can enforce some rules and regulations. So now we're going to get into 5882 city docks. So city docks are open from dawn to dusk and closed from dusk to dawn unless there is signage indicated. And the reason why I wanted to put this in here, it was also in Chapter 78, but I felt it was important that it was in 58. Now, understand the docks on the waterfront in Chapter 78 did state, which we're recommending that it be removed, that those docks are closed from midnight, 12:01 to 5 a.m. It is very, very difficult for us to enforce that time frame. Also, there is no reason for a boat to tie up to those docks and stay there from 5 a.m. till 12 midnight. And that's what's happening. Actually, we're having a hard time even getting them off at 12 midnight because we can't, without a warrant, we can't go onto the vessel to try and get them to come up to have a conversation with them. So we're looking at changing those hours, and what the police department and I have discussed recommending is that it's 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. That way we have a better tool in our toolbox to enforce the rules that these are day docks, not docks for you to tie your boat up to for days on end. No vessel shall remain tied to a loading zone in excess of 15 minutes. So at Curry Park, we have staging docks. So if you're picking up your family or friends and coolers and whatnot to go out on the boat, you can tie up there and not usurp the boat ramp finger piers. Use of city docks outside of the operational hours is prohibited without first making arrangements for such accommodations in writing with the Director of Parks and Recreation, who shall assign space and collect reasonable rent charges in conformity with established regulation and rates. What that means is we do have a lot of dinner charter yachts that come and use our docks. They may come after hours to drop off their customers. We also do have some fishing charters that use our docks. So this way we know who's there after hours, but they're not staying. They're just coming, embarking or disembarking their guests. Operation of vessels. This is one that the police department really wanted to put in place, especially with our waterfront concessionaire who has rental boats out there. It shall be unlawful to navigate, direct, or handle any vessel in such a manner as to place the public, the occupants of the vessels, or other occupants of any other vessel in danger. Because, they've been out on their boats, and they're the ones that are our Marine Patrol just off of our waterfront. Moving on, unattended vessels, here we go again. Dinghies or other watercraft at city docks or boat ramps may be removed and disposed of pursuant to city policy, federal and state and local laws. So there are some federal policies or laws and state laws that we are required to then give boats a certain period of time if they're derelict vessels or if they're tied up and they're in danger or have no means of mobility. So there are certain laws that we have to follow from the state, but otherwise this will allow us to remove and dispose of dinghies that are left tied up to our docks for months on end. Chaining or otherwise locking bicycles, carts, scooters, anywhere on city docks is prohibited, and such items shall be disposed of pursuant to city policy, federal, state, and local laws. So we do have a lot of boaters that come up with their dinghies. They tie their bicycles there overnight. They go maybe to work or maybe to the grocery store or whatever. But there are bikes that have been tied up there for months, or were tied up there for months, that we were unable to find the owners, and we just left them there. Well, now we can remove them. Use of city water and city electricity at city docks is prohibited. And now, any questions about city docks and the ordinances? Yes.
Thanks so much for bringing this to us. My question, just about what you just mentioned, I know we were talking about docks, but specifically talking about using the city electric, and then you referenced earlier that some of the things that you're talking about, parks, are going to actually apply to all public places. So, I mean, when you're saying, for example, that using city electric at a dock is not authorized, but are we calling a dock, do we also mean that any city property that would be the case, or?
Yeah, it's also stated in 81, so 5881, we do also state electricity and water. So this just simply says to docks, because we're having a lot of issues on those docks with the boaters. They throw out hoses and they fill their water tanks with city water, and then they try and hook into our electricity. They've broken into our electrical panels. So this way, our police and our code officers can actually cite them on those docks.
We are having also issues in parks with that same
Yes.
issue. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that would be
We
included.
included a general provision too, yes.
So,
Ms. Rockwell, can you go back to slide 11? I don't know if
Sure.
you.
oh, yes, thank you. So 5884, commercial use. So what we're finding is ever since COVID, it really has taken on a world of its own. A lot of commercial use in our parks, which we love if they get a permit, and depending on what they're doing, if they provide us with insurance and share in some of their profits. So this says that no person shall operate a commercial business in a park, recreational area, city dock, or public property without a permit from the city's Parks and Rec Department. This prohibition shall include the commercial offering of things like dog training, pickleball, tennis, or any other sport or physical activity. So we have a lot of tennis pros that come out there teaching lessons. We don't know if they're certified. We don't know if they're licensed. We don't know if they have insurance. They're charging their customer to use our public courts. They're making a living, which we're happy to help them do that as long as they follow the city's process, which is to get a permit. And that permit right now, just as an example, they can rent the court for $5 an hour. So as long as they come and they rent the court, we are happy to help them be successful. Any questions? So now we're going to go to Melissa again with proposed changes to Chapter 78.
And this portion of the ordinance is fairly short relating to Chapter 78. I think our main goal here was to make sure that provisions, the changes to Chapter 78 start towards the back on page 14, so it's towards the end of the ordinance. We wanted to make sure all of the provisions in Chapter 78 were consistent with related provisions in Chapter 58, including provisions concerning city docks. And so the very short provision you will see in Chapter 78 is section 466, 78-466, which was changed to mirror the change to the definitional section in Chapter 58 regarding public places and public property. And then section 78-467, specifically related to conduct in public places. All of these changes relate to changes which were in Chapter 58 to make them consistent. So all of these changes are also mirrored in Chapter 58. And all of the changes, or all of the provisions in Chapter 78 can now be enforced through Chapter 58 because of the change in definition to public places and public spaces, and because we ensured the consistency of both those chapters. And that, in short, that is, in short, the changes to Chapter 78. Very, very short, 2 sections, Section 78-466 and 78-467.
Okay. Yes, I think we'll go to Commissioner Ward.
Actually, it wasn't on this section. I just had a question about the commercial use, if you don't mind. Sometimes I find that when we asking for permits and things like that, and I know your office is really great about this, I just want to make sure, when someone comes and says, you know what, I have been teaching, and I do want to follow the rules, is there somebody on staff that's going to guide them and not just say, go get, you got to go do all these things and then come back to us, but that guides them through this process so that they know they have someone helping them along the way?
Absolutely. Tawana Piscasio in my office has worked diligently with boot camp instructors, with tennis instructors, just holding their hands, really showing them their process and what we need from them. It's not a lot, and then she follows back up saying, hey, do you need any help? So we really do try. The ones that really come to us and say, hey, I want to do this right, we certainly guide them through that process.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
What's the warning process for this?
So I'll give you an example myself. I've gone out to the tennis courts and have had conversations with tennis pros that are out there, and oftentimes they just say, I'm just hitting with my friends, but they have a hopper of tennis balls, which means we're not hitting with my friends, because I first asked them, hey, are you teaching a lesson? I'd love to learn more about your program. And they said, yeah, and they said, we're out here. And I said, okay, so by the way, and so I talked to them first, and I said, I really need for you to call our office. I give them my business card. I said, we want to walk you through the process. We want you out here to do what you're doing, but we would like you to do it the right way, because if one of your students trips and falls because of your lesson, they're going to sue us. But we want to make sure that you also have insurance, not just to protect yourself, but to protect your students. And I'd have to say 9 times out of 10, I never hear from them again. And then I go back out there and I have to have that conversation again. We have not had this in the ordinance to help the police and code enforcement enforce it. This codifies it so that we can then start finding them if they don't follow the rules.
Will we be posting anything anywhere?
There are signs at all of our facilities. At our basketball courts, at our tennis courts, we do have signs up telling them that they need a permit in order to teach lessons, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Peduzzi?
You had mentioned $5 to rent a court for an hour. Does that include the permit fee, or is that the permit fee separate?
That is the permit fee.
That is the permit fee, okay. And do you require certificates of insurance, naming the city as a secondary insured, and what level of insurance are you requiring? I'm just wondering how tough this is of a hoop for them to jump through.
If they are a certified tennis pro with the USPTA, they can get their insurance through the USPTA, and it's very nominal. It's not expensive. Same thing with the boot camp instructor. They can get their insurance through a certifying organization. I'm an instructor. I have insurance through my certifying organization. It's maybe a couple $500 a year to be insured. So if they're a tennis pro and they're charging $75, $100 an hour for a lesson, and the city is asking for $5 in proof of insurance for the year, it's protecting the city.
Do you just require the proof of insurance, or do you require a COI naming the city as a secondary insured?
Right now, we're just asking them to provide me their proof. We will move to the COI, but if I could just get them in the door with their proof of insurance, I would be a happy camper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. And when you just said 75, 100, you meant 75 or $100. I thought I heard 7,500 an hour.
No.
And I was like, my goodness, that's some good tennis lessons.
Depends on the tennis pro and depends on if they're doing a group lesson or singles. It's
Very
across
good.
the board. Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for all of this. But, as I was taking all of this in and reviewing the changes, I just wanted to take a step back and also talk a little bit about the vision of parks. And while we're talking about restricting use, and I understand that we're restricting use so that others can utilize it for the way that it was intended. I just want us to, for all of us as policymakers, but the staff as well, you know, to keep in mind that the idea of parks is so that everyone can enjoy it and that we have a place where people can go who, you know, whether it's just to enjoy a beautiful area or because they can't afford to pay for other recreation areas, that we provide these areas for them. And I'm extremely appreciative. I know I use one of our parks almost every single day, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that we provide here in the city. So thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go to like the fines and penalties, which is great because Sergeant Davis has arrived. But we're going to let Melissa talk about enforcement.
Enforcement, this is the enforcement section from section 58-91. And I think that the enforcement is, thanks, come on up. So, so I think the enforcement, as I understand it, would be through code enforcement and the police department, depending on what that area is. And also, we have a section in here which I think is useful, which is not this is not the only, we have a section on ejectment, which means that parks can ask people to leave, and if they don't leave, then they can ask the police to come and have them removed. And this is, I think, an important section to have in there to give parks the authority, you know, behind what they need to do to enforce their code. Is there anything you want to add that?
No, this would be one of the biggest obstacles that we run into, especially like with the docks, when we have these boats that'll just dock up and they'll be there for months at a time, and sometimes they'll take the entire dock up where no one can utilize these facilities. And at times we have to track down the owner. Once we try to track the owner, there's a lot of things with registration and things like that. We just don't have no teeth or no enforcement action to actually remove them other than to try to cite them, and that can be sometimes as long as a 3 to 4 month process. Being the fact that we can actually eject them would really simplify this process and actually give us some teeth to this ordinance.
So again, as we worked on this ordinance, one of the big goals was to make sure that this parks ordinance was enforceable not just in parks but in public places. I know that the police department is happy about that change, and those are essentially the major changes in the ordinance. And I think that we wanted to go ahead and open up for questions. I know we've had several questions already, but.
Commissioner Ward.
When is this being brought before us?
We were waiting to see if there were any changes that you were recommending in this proposal. We're hoping to bring it to you first reading in April, and if we can fit the second reading in April, we will do that as well.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys could tell from my commentary, I'm very supportive of this, and I'm very appreciative of you all for pushing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peduzzi?
Just a quick question about the prohibition of adults being without children in the playground area. I assume that that's just limited to right where the playground equipment is. So whatever the delineation is, probably with the ground cover,
Yes.
is where it would be considered prohibited?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It wouldn't be in a park bench like, 20 feet away. It would be in the playground area that is like the rubber surfaced area where there are benches.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Well, that brings up a good point then, because a lot of those areas, the problems that I know I personally have and other residents have are the benches right around, so that's not on the rubbered area all the time.
Oh, so clarification, and the benches around the rubber area looking into the playground?
So it's that whole
that's
encompassed, okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it was as opposed to a general area where kids might be playing. I think this relates specifically to areas which are designated as playgrounds.
Thank you, Commissioner Fox.
Just curious, do we have a park that allows horseback riding?
We currently do not, I don't believe, Grassy Waters may at times have had allowed horses out there, but we do not. But back in the day, there were horses in our green spaces. But we kept it in there. I kept it in there because of Grassy, and there's a lot of, sometimes there's trail rides and things that happen. So we thought we'd just leave it in there just in case.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to provide that we haven't covered?
No, I'm just thankful that we spent many hours with the police department, in particular with Sergeant Heiser, and I know that he has been working with Sergeant Davis and the rest of the team trying to get our waterfront under control, and that's where a lot of our issues currently are, our waterfront parks and our docks, and this will certainly help them with the enforcement by codifying some of the rules.
Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you. Sorry, I just thought of one other question. As it relates to fields that are designated for, like a baseball field or softball field, it's designated for that, and we might have permitted use and rec leagues that utilize that. What is the restriction or the allowance for those fields when they're not in use by those organizations?
Someone can pull a permit if, a group of college kids or a group of people want to just go out and play a pickup game of softball or baseball, they can get a permit to do so. That way we can make sure that the fields are safe and playable. Many times when we are not, some of those that are competition fields, so to speak, when they are not in use by the city or by a permitted league, they are resting. They are being maintained and they are resting so that they will be playable for the next season of leagues and recreation program activities. So as much as we would like those fields just to be open, we do have fields that are available that are just open for their use that are not our competition leagues fields, so to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from the commission, Madam Administrator?
I just want to recognize, the staff efforts here. I know it's been a heavy lift because we have, for some time now, sort of been compiling the concerns and issues that individual commissioners, have brought to administration's attention, and it's been a challenge because we did not have any enforcement mechanisms to address the problems, and that's frustrating because you all have to respond to constituents and they look for the city, to take action. And I would say that for the majority, of the users of our public spaces, whether they're parks or the waterfront, they're good actors. But on occasion, as human nature tends to be, we have sometimes individuals who don't act accordingly, and so we have to have a mechanism to address that, and I think this goes a long way. So I want to recognize the staff team because it was a cross-function of operations that have been working on this to bring it before you, and we're looking forward to moving it forward. And I'm just going to ask Commissioner Ward to stop emailing me until we can get it before you, and I'm just teasing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. So this brings us on to item 3, other items from the commission. Commissioner Lambert.
Administrator Johnson, I was just curious, and I don't expect an answer now, but maybe we can follow up later. Given the discussion about grants that we were talking about in the railroad safety presentation, it just got me thinking about that position that we have, and I believe that it's filled within City Hall, about a grants manager, and I was just curious how that's going and if we're seeing that to be successful, because I think when we talked about that, we said we could use 5 of those positions.
In fact, your question is very timely in that we have just made a selection for that position, and the person will be coming on board the latter part of this month. See how quickly I solved that?
Thank you.
Awesome. Great timing. Great timing. Anything else from the body? All right. So with that, this meeting of the Mayor Commission Work Session is adjourned.
Thank you.